I never imagined my life could unravel so quickly. He was my world, my husband, and yet the betrayal came like a storm. When he left me for another, he seemed to revel in his newfound freedom, looking down on me with disdain. But as the truth began to surface, revealing the depth of his deceit, the very man who had discarded me found himself humbled and broken. This is the story of how a shattered heart found strength, and a man's arrogance met its match in reality. I get busy cleaning up without really saying hello. Realizing this. At last, James, my ex-husband, speaks up. Surprised, he says, "You're not even going to cry." I suppose he anticipated that when he requested a divorce, I would object and sob. To be honest, though, I always felt that he was conceited. There were others who had also lost interest in love. "It's going to be more difficult on you, though, following the divorce. Not me." James attempted to sound assured as he spoke. I laughed so hard I could barely contain myself instead of crying. "By what do you mean?" James inquired, appearing perplexed. "You're going to have trouble dealing with a big shot like me and a housewife like you, Kate. I'm going to get married again soon, so you'll be by yourself." He grinned, confident in everyday circumstances. "You might be correct. But I am aware of Emma, the person you are having an affair with. Not exactly the best, is she?" "How come? What name do you know for her?" James had a shocked expression. "My name is Kate, a homemaker of 32 years old. We had a lot in common and were the same age when I met my husband James at a social event." James and I became fast friends, and not long after our marriage, he made a good living working in sales at a trading company. I had a comfortable life free from financial hardships because of him. However, there was a major issue. Our marriage wasn't working out. We had been married for 7 years already. We were in love at first, spending a lot of time together and eating meals together, however occupied James was. But eventually, the intimacy vanished. "Be careful." One evening I said, "How about dinner? It's not necessary for me. I'll get takeout. You can head straight to bed. I'll arrive home somewhat late," he answered. "Fine, I understand." Sensing the space between us, I spoke. "James used to say that back when we were newlyweds. The highlight of my day is when I get to eat with you, Kate." Now, though, he frequently returned home after midnight, well past the hour I went to bed. It felt like he was avoiding me like a moody teenager when he left for work without saying anything to me in the morning. It was at that point that I noticed James was acting strangely. Did he use this hair product before? I pondered. The bathroom suddenly had a whole line of skincare products and cologne. James used to have no concern for how he looked. Not that he had many casual clothes, perfect fits. However, he was now spending cash on branded clothing. Initially, I believed that he might be going through a transition. I didn't mind because he took no pleasure in his appearance. However, something didn't feel quite right. His actions turned suspicious. He began using his phone covertly and even brought it into the shower and bathroom. I used to come dangerously close to sitting on it when he would leave it strewn about. Why was he so different now? I started to think he was having an affair. I sensed that he was getting home later and later, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. I made an effort to ignore those thoughts even though our marriage was becoming chilly. I wanted to trust James still. The idea of him being unfaithful to me scared me deep down. I attempted to improve our relationship by acting as though nothing was wrong, rather than confronting the reality. In an attempt to engage James more, I proposed that we go out together. However, he dismissed me each time I went up to him. Having been married for 7 years, I suppose it made sense. Our relationship had turned nearly into a farce, despite my efforts. I felt so alone because of his coldness. In this manner, events continued. I was starting to feel exhausted. I finally gave in one night and asked him straight because I couldn't bear to hang back any longer. "Hey, are you really not being dishonest?" James merely gave me a look and said nothing. "Make a statement. Are you or are you not cheating?" He stayed silent for a while before getting up from the couch and coming over to the table where I was seated. He then lowered his head and apologized to Kate. "Divorce is what I want." I was unable to speak. That was not what I expected him to say. However, he persisted despite my silence. "I've developed feelings for another woman. With her, I want to begin a new life." How could he so easily say something so self-serving? "How about our combined 7 years? Though I had a sneaking suspicion there might be another woman, I never imagined he would put it so directly. I felt like my attempts to mend our relationship were in vain. Was this really how heartless the man I fell in love with? I thought he was the most amazing person I had ever met when we first got together. I was unable to even talk now. My thoughts were racing through my head. James then said something that caused me to wonder if I had understood him correctly. Actually, she is carrying my child. I want to spend the future with her and our child. I thought I was going to pass out. During our 7 years together, everything around me appeared to blur. Despite not using protection, we never had children. Actually, we had undergone fertility treatments and had been actively attempting to conceive. The doctor said that despite everything, we were unable to become parents. Despite his infertility, James consistently expressed his desire for a child. We persisted, despite knowing it would be challenging. I always tried my hardest to live up to his standards, but we had stopped trying and our relationship had lost its spark recently. It appears that one of the main reasons he wanted a divorce was because he had a child with his mistress. I've always desired to have a child, and I want my mother to meet her grandchild immediately. Kate, you do realize this, don't you? Please release me. Let us file for divorce. For the previous 2 years, his mother had been hospitalized due to a serious illness. I now knew why he desired for her to hold a grandchild. But to have a kid not with me, but with another woman, how bad might he be? Like you, I wanted a kid. I underwent fertility treatments for this reason. I assumed that we were both experiencing the anguish of not being able to procreate. Are you aware of how self-centered you are? You turned on me. I was furious and yelled at James, but he just bowed and seemed to be waiting for me to cool down. It infuriated me even more. How does she behave as a woman, simply because she is expecting your child? This divorce I'm not ready to accept. When I pushed him for more information about her, he apologized but said he wanted to respect her privacy. How are you so self-centered? I'm married to you. I'm entitled to know. I insisted. I kept asking James about her, but he refused to give me any information. He merely mentioned that she is 2 years younger than him. Kate. And that's it. She works for a company. What a joke. Even though I was pushing James, I had the feeling that he must genuinely care about her. He withheld important information from me for days. We continued to talk about the circumstances, but I wouldn't consent to the divorce. I didn't want things to be so simple for him. James kept bending his head and pleading with them throughout. I no longer feel anything for you. Why should one remain married? My mother is aware of this as well, and she finds it acceptable. I was shocked to learn that he had spoken with my mother-in-law already. Although our relationship hasn't been as strong lately, I still believe we have a good one. James continued to drop bombshell after bombshell. She already has an engagement ring from me. Soon, we intend to move in together. All that remains is for us to file for divorce. I thought that I might pass out. Even though James was sincere about his relationship with the woman he was seeing, I refused to accept the divorce. We went back and forth like this for nearly a month. James finally ran out of patience. He begged one day while on his hands and knees. I am at my breaking point. Accept the divorce already. We haven't been together for a very long time. There is no reason to continue with this. Just let me go, please. He was practically begging me to let him go as he rubbed his forehead against the floor. I waited for almost a month before deciding whether or not to accept the divorce. She works for a company. What a joke. Despite my persistent questions, I couldn't help but feel that he must genuinely care about her. James withheld pertinent information from me for days. We continued to discuss it, but I wouldn't consent to the split. I didn't want things to go precisely as he had intended. James, meanwhile, would not stop begging me, shaking his head and uttering, I beg you, Kate. I no longer love you. Why should one remain married? My mother is aware as well, and she doesn't mind. I was shocked by the last line. He had discussed the matter with my mother-in-law already. Even though we hadn't been as close lately, I still felt that our relationship was good. James then revealed even more startling information. She already has an engagement ring from me. Soon, we intend to move in together. You only need to consent to the divorce at this point. I thought I might faint because I felt dizzy. I refused to grant my husband a divorce, even though I knew he was seriously considering a future with the woman he was seeing. For nearly a month, there was this back and forth. James finally ran out of patience. He knelt down one day and pleaded, "I can't take this anymore. Accept the divorce, please. We haven't been together for a very long time. It would be futile to continue this. Just let me go, please." He was begging me from the floor, head down. I hung on for almost a month before considering whether it was time to let go. James's complexion went white. A few weeks later, I had learned a great deal about his mistress. Emma is her name, to start. She is 27 years old and has gone through 2 divorces. She resides with her parents at the moment. I found out that Emma is not well liked. She has a child with her first husband, but she's notorious for flinging men at random. He has custody, and she's been banned from seeing the child because she's considered a bad influence. On top of that, Emma isn't faithful. She's been seeing other men even while involved with James. The private investigator I hired even saw her going into a motel with other men. I made sure to have photos taken as proof when I showed all of this to James, along with the pictures. He collapsed. Not in a way. Emma can't be that kind of woman. She only loved me. We were planning to start a family. James seemed deeply in love with Emma, and it was frustrating to watch. She didn't stand out in terms of looks, but she clearly knew how to charm men. "This is a lie. You're just trying to shake me up. These pictures must be fake," James protested. "Believe it or not, that's up to you," I said. "But your mistress, I apologize. Your new wife has been seeing other men. Maybe the child isn't even yours." "James." His face grew even paler. "Not in a way. Not Emma. The private investigator found this information. James, the chances are high that she's using you. Maybe you're just the one with the most money. And that's why she tells you to marry, even if the child isn't yours. You wanted one so badly, right? Good luck raising it." That was the final blow. I packed my things and left the apartment. A while later, I got an email from James. He wanted to get back together, as I had suspected. The child Emma gave birth to wasn't James's. When he confronted her, she admitted, "I didn't know whose child it was until after it was born." But since they were already married, James was legally responsible for the child. Emma had only used him for his money as proof. James had even paid her share of the alimony, giving me a total of $80,000. James was furious and confronted Emma, but she just said, "You seemed happy to take care of me." Then one day, she left the child behind and disappeared. James called me begging for forgiveness. "You were right. I was deceived. I really apologize. Can we start over?" I was disgusted. "Do you think I'll come back just because you're saying all these nice things? You had an affair. That's a fact. You turned on me. Accept the reality." I hung up after that. Later, I heard from a mutual friend that James handed the child. Emma abandoned over to her parents, telling them to take responsibility. But her parents didn't want the trouble and told him to raise the child. James refused, saying, "I have no obligation to raise a child that's not mine." He even submitted DNA test results to prove the child wasn't his and revoked his acknowledgement of the child. Emma's parents had no idea the child wasn't James's. After they found her, they took her back home and are now forcing her to raise the child, keeping her under close watch to prevent her from seeing other men freely. Even though James is no longer connected to Emma, he ended up paying the $80,000 in alimony, including the portion that covered Emma. This wiped out his savings. He's been demanding that Emma repay the money he paid for her, but she doesn't care and claims she can't repay what she doesn't have. As a result, James has become a divorced man with no savings. He's struggling to focus at work, making lots of mistakes, and was eventually transferred to a department in a rural area with no chances of promotion. Now he lives a lonely and isolated life. Meanwhile, I moved back to my parents' house and started helping with their farming business. A few years later, I met and fell in love with a local fisherman, and we got married. We don't have children, but I'm living a happy life with my husband, who is always kind to me.